Hey everyone. So here's my weekly update for what I've been doing for the past week. Not gonna lie, it's been really frustrating. I kind of came to this plateau with my painting. Yeah, definitely a low point. I couldn't seem to get enough contrast and detail in the skin tones. The skin tones either were turning out muddy or like garishly orange when I tried to add some warmth back into it. And I kind of thought, like, I don't know what exactly I'm supposed to do at this point. Since it's still winter, after about like 5, I would say even 4:30, I couldn't get any actual light coming into my studio, and so it was kind of pretty much pointless in doing any work. So I felt like my schedule, like first thing in the morning, light's not exactly true. I'd get only a few hours to work, and then after like I said, 4:30, I couldn't even work anymore, and that was feeling really frustrating, having really short days, making very little progress. If I was working past sunset, I would wake up in the morning and then my painting would be completely different to what I had actually thought I was doing the night before. So that felt like a total waste of time. Sometimes you are on a timeline. Sometimes there is a deadline and you really can't take breaks, especially with oil painting, and you have to give that like a good day to dry in between coats sometimes, or in between layers. So it's like you got to keep doing it. You can't just take a break. You can't just work on something else. One thing to note is seeing the forest through the trees. Like, if you're distracted and you're just trying to achieve the end point of finishing the painting, sometimes you miss out on what you actually need to be doing, which is building those midtones, building those textures, and those platforms for adding detail later. And that's what I learned the hard way this week, which is really frustrating because I spent like 3 weeks on this painting or more, and I've like kind of gotten to ground zero essentially. I started finding myself obsessed with Cheez-Its, and like not in a I enjoy this anymore kind of way, in like a I need Cheez-Its, and then I would eat them and I wouldn't even enjoy it, and then you get like a weird Cheez-It hangover from eating like junk food during the day. I started to wonder if that's what like dog food is like. Like they go, this is pretty much flavorless and overrated, but by the time you're ready to eat again, you forget and you just get excited because you remember it being good for some reason. So I tried to tackle this whole contrast issue by adding more darks to kind of ground everything, and kind of going in with more detail in terms of those darks. You have to kind of hit those lows and then stop and let it set up. Very minimal blending, or else it does kind of just dilute the intensity. I realized I needed to build up opacity in the skin more. So when you're working on like a really thin surface like paper, you don't need a lot of layering to be able to build a little texture on that paper. But what I was finding is that with canvas, like duh, but I had to build up a lot more opacity to be able to get that texture to level, especially because I had worked on my whites in the clothing and the background a little bit more. I had to keep pushing through, honestly. I mean, I had to literally add a layer, blend it out, let it set, come back, add another layer, let it set, start to build up that range of tones. So one thing to note is seeing the forest through the trees. Like, if you're distracted and you're just trying to achieve the end point of finishing the painting, sometimes you miss out on what you actually need to be doing, which is building those midtones, building those textures, and those platforms for adding detail later. And that's what I learned the hard way this week, which is really frustrating because I spent like 3 weeks on this painting or more, and I've like kind of gotten to ground zero essentially. I also started watching that Frontline documentary about Amazon, and I literally couldn't get through it because it started to give me an actual panic attack. Like, what I didn't really anticipate was that Jeff Bezos had planned for world domination back in the 90s. I guess I kind of assumed it was, an innocent accident that Amazon became so successful. And it really scares me. I mean, it's like a terrifying vision of a dystopian future to think that a company like Amazon could literally control everything. So if you're conspiracy theory minded, or if you have fears of a dystopian future, like, just stay innocent for a while, because I don't think that documentary is going to do you any favors. And I thought it was kind of interesting to think about how there are all these negative stories about Bernie Sanders coming out via the Washington Post. You know, as we know, Bernie is one of the front runners and candidates who is like the biggest proponent of taxing billionaires. And guess who owns the Washington Post? Is Jeff Bezos. So cool. But Jeff Bezos, if you're watching this, we're cool, right? I mean, those satin tuxedo jackets, like, c'est magnifique. One thing I was very frustrated by is that when I initially started toning this painting, I mixed up like really tiny batches of colors because I am cheap. And I really was struggling to get those little batches of colors to go the distance when it comes to this painting. I think I can salvage it, but if you have started a painting, just think about like how far your paint's gonna actually go, considering it's gonna dry, you know, in the next coming weeks. Even though I stick my palette in the freezer, it's still drying, and I have felt kind of thwarted on that front. I feel like all of this noodling, and I'm only like 55-ish% done with the painting. I need to add so much more detail, so much more contrast, refine my edges, and then tone it. I mean, add more glazes on top of that to kind of marry it all together. I feel like I'm all this time, and I'm just at the starting point for like all of those touches that bring the painting to the next level. So I guess it's better late than never, honestly, because I think if you come to that point where you're just feeling so frustrated and stagnant and at a loss of what you're supposed to do, having the breakthrough of what it is that you need to fix is its own, I guess, fix. But it's very frustrating. And like I said, when you're under a deadline, it's not like you can just like push it away and be like, yeah, I'll deal with this later. You kind of have to say, well, I got to deal with this now. So I got to wake up tomorrow morning and I need to get started and I need to push through. So that's my experience this week. Yeah, sometimes it feels extremely hopeless and you just don't want to do it anymore. And I think that it's important to share the experience of frustration, because I know that for a long time I've only been posting like my final photos, and I've been kind of like ashamed of showing the process because it looks pretty bad up until the last point. You know, it looks really bad until you have kind of decided that that's as far as you can come. And even when you've been doing this for years, you can still get to that point where you're like, I don't know what I need to do. Like, this isn't working. So I can't say that I'm feeling awesome about this painting, but I can say that I'm going to continue to keep working towards the end goal of getting it to a place where I'm really satisfied. And I do think that when you're struggling with the feeling that it's not good enough, it means that you really are seeing it like through a heightened lens of awareness. So inevitably your painting or your final product is going to be probably better than you've ever done, or at least it's going to push you to get a little bit stronger, even though in the moment it feels completely hopeless. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. That's my week. I hope that was informative or interesting. So again, anything you're seeing, like, keep in mind this is a 55% done painting, but anything you can contribute in terms of advice, I would love to hear. And other than that, I guess I'll see you later. Bye.